Hi, good evening. Good evening, everyone. Good evening, everyone. Oh. This is a meeting of the Overview and Scrutiny Management Committee on Tuesday, the 6th of February. I'm Councillor Alistair Neal, and I'm the chairman of this committee. Right. Just to remind everyone what we're all about. So the role of Overview and Scrutiny is to provide an independent, critical friend, challenge, and to work with the council's executive and other public service providers for the benefit of the public. The committee considers submissions from a range of sources and reaches conclusions based on the weight of evidence, not on party political grounds. And then just to remind everyone, this meeting may be filmed for inclusion on the council's web. This meeting is being live streamed, and this meeting may be filmed for inclusion in the council's website. Please note that other people may film, record, tweet or blog from this meeting. The use of these images or recordings is not under the council's control. So, apologies for absence.
We have apologies from Alison Swaddle and Stuart Monroe. Graham Howe and I believe Phil Cunnington are attending as subs, but Phil's not here yet.
Okay, so minutes of the previous meeting. Has anyone got any comments on the minutes of the previous meeting? No, so someone like to propose the minutes? Andrew? Would like to second? Chris? We vote on who approves the minutes. That's all, I think. So, declarations of interest. Has anyone got any declarations of interest? No. Public question time.
We have no public questions and no member questions, Chair.
Okay, thanks. So we can move on to the agenda item, recruitment and retention update, to scrutinise the council's approach to staff recruitment and retention. And we have Rachel and Louise, I think.
Excuse me, Chair, may I make a suggestion? Oh, the slides are being shown. Brilliant, thank you.
Good evening, councillors. Thank you, Chair. And I'm going to take you through the slides that I've provided that you have in your pack. If it's okay, I'll go through the slides, and then if you have any questions or comments, I'm very happy to take those, obviously alongside my lead member. So just moving through, just to give some background, we very specifically come to talk about recruitment and retention, but just very quickly some background. The new team that was put in 2022 with some sort of different expectations on delivery around HR, and one of those specific objectives was very much looking at our recruitment and retention offer and how we make an improvement. We've been establishing strong relationships with our senior management team, extended leadership teams, our assistant directors right across the council, and then down into the different services, making sure that we are there to support them when they are looking to recruit. The introduction of a dedicated resourcing team has improved, I feel, the recruitment with regard to our success. We sort of hope there's a much better professional approach, and we are targeting skilled shortages so that we can try and target the market to find the right candidates for the roles. And the slides as I go through, I'll try and demonstrate that to you. And obviously, if you have any questions, I'm very happy to answer them. Also running alongside this, we have the workforce programme, and that workforce programme is looking at a number of different elements around all of HR and organisational development. But as I say, I'm here to concentrate on recruitment and retention this evening. So just to start off with, this is information that you see on a regular basis, and we come to overview in Scrutiny, and one of the areas is staff turnover that we look to share. As you can see there, this is the last sort of obviously the last year, we are seeing a steady improvement. Back in 2021, we were up at 16.55%. I would say that's associated to the I think they called it the big resignation after COVID, and we are now seeing that starting to drop, and we are seeing sort of quarter on quarter that sort of coming back down and getting into a more of a steady state with regard to our retention. I think it's important just to say that it's quite healthy as well in an organisation to have turnover. I don't mean that we want to lose lots of skill and knowledge, but it is healthy because you get new ideas, new approaches, new ways of thinking coming into the organisation. And I've just named a few of the different projects that we're looking at with regard to our retention, and I will come on to those a little bit later just to give you a little bit more explanation. So recruitment, starting off. Some of the highlights of our achievements. We've got a new recruitment process, an improved application method. Sometimes people were being put off on the length of the application. And so what we're trying to do, obviously there are statutory roles that you've got to make sure that you've got specific skills and qualifications. It's not about cutting corners. It's about getting people in so we can speak to them early on, and then obviously we then sort of explore those qualifications and obviously making sure that they're right for the role. But it's not putting them off at the very first point of the application feeling sort of very long. We're reducing advertising costs, increased average application levels, and average time to hire is also improving, which again is important because it's about getting that skill in so that you are then using less on recruitment agencies and the high spend where you have to have that sort of cover. So again, just a few statistics just to sort of share with you, just a comparison of what was in 2022 to 2023. Job advertisements 465, now 361. Some of that was because where we've now got the resourcing team. When I say resourcing team, I'm talking about two people. There's two people currently in that team. What we were seeing was that you were needing to go out on repeat occasions for the same job because we weren't being successful when we were first sort of putting the job out for advert. So that is definitely where we're seeing a lot of improvement. Number of applications has gone up. Now that is good and bad. Obviously, it's about the quality. I think that's really quite important that we're looking at the quality of our applications. But equally, it's very time consuming going through a recruitment process. So it's making sure that our recruiting managers are getting the right level of people to look at so that they can make a choice with regard to who is then successful in the role. And there you can see the average time from advert to obviously time to hire has gone down quite considerably from 64 working days to 41. And again, we're looking all of the time at how we can improve that with regard to further improvements. As I say, just a few more pieces of information that I just wanted to share as well. So average application for an advert is there's an increase of 45%, lost my words for a moment there, an increase of 45% on the average application per advert, reduced average time, increase in appointing on the first time advertising has increased by 26%, reduced the number of adverts, and we've also saved 129,000 on recruitment agency spend. And the reason I know that's a real amount of money is because this is to do a lot with the senior management recruitment that we've been doing. In the past, we've relied on going out to agencies and using agencies for that recruitment. The last director post that we went out for, we did the whole process from start to finish without needing to use an agency. And that's where I'm sort of counting those savings, because I'm still seeing that investment that we've made in our recruitment team is still seeing real dividends. How have we delivered those achievements? Better.
Oh, sorry.
Did you?
Sorry, do you want to take question? Oh, right, okay.
Okay. Sorry. No worries. So we've got new structured recruitment process and targeted advertising. So it's going out on the right platforms for the jobs, not just any platform. So again, if we are spending some money, that we are actually making sure that we are focusing on the right types of candidate. We're working much closer with our hiring managers. So we're actually advising them and helping them with regard to them not having to be the specialist in this area. Partnering with our apprenticeships and interim recruitment. So again, what we mean by that is if there is an opportunity for a role to be an apprentice, again, we will very much have that conversation with managers and obviously work with them on how they could convert that into an apprenticeship. We're monitoring our adverts and application levels sort of all of the time. So when certain jobs are going out, we're looking at what sort of response we're getting. We're not just ignoring what's happening. So if it's not working, let's change the approach. Let's not just leave it. What do we need to do to sort of increase? So again, you know, it's just understanding that return on investment all of the time. We also, as I've said, I think I've mentioned the CV upload. It's actually something that sometimes local government don't do, but it's actually what a lot of people will have, their CV, and it's allowing that to be used in the application process just to improve it and speed everything up. Improve candidate engagement. So again, if we're going out on a high profile role, being there to contact, talk them through what's the experience of the job. So again, always sort of making sure that not just the fact that we're then getting the right people to apply, but hopefully the experience and when they sort of touch and obviously speak to somebody at Woking Borough Council, they get a positive experience, because I think it's important. And also we've done a new microsite for senior recruitment. 24-25, what we want to do, again, improvements on the recruitment process, always looking at how we can improve it, giving good sort of user guides, shortlisting, interviewing. I think there's, again, lots of things where we can make further improvements. Again, look at our marketing and making sure whether or not we're getting that right and actually sort of report on that. And again, looking at those savings that we can make as in the process. This is just some of these are not all of the roles, but this is just to try and give you a flavour of some of the roles that we've had success in. And some of these have in the past been quite difficult to recruit to. So again, it's just making sure that, you know, it's not just one size fits all. We adapt and look at the right approach for the job. And often the recruiting manager has a really good idea around that. So it's using that information and experience, and then the recruitment team using that and then building the campaign so that we can be successful. So as I say, those are just a few of our successes. And just lastly, some points around retention. So just with regards to inclusive employment project that we've got running at the moment. So this is looking at our apprenticeships, work experience. We also want to look at T-levels and working with colleges, etc., on the offer that we may have there, internships, and we've also got the graduate academy. So it's just trying to look at the whole piece and again, looking at our offer. We're obviously looking at policy review, which again, I think is important, and it's just good to have flexible working policies in place for all of not just the managers, but also for employees as well. And again, I've just named a few of the different areas that we're currently working on. Learning and development. So we've just sort of bringing together a leadership program that we're planning to put all of our managers through. That will also include those that are aspiring managers. So again, looking at succession planning wherever we can. And our health and well-being is obviously really important. So again, it's just making sure that the offer that we have there is constantly kept under review, and that our staff are aware of what's there to support them. And as I say, that's just a few of the different examples that we're currently looking at. A number of these areas we take through to Personnel Board, because that's the committee whereby obviously they set the terms and conditions for staff. But as I say, so we work with councillors through that process. And then finally, I don't know, I've got lots of messages coming up and getting in the way, but luckily you can't see those. But it's
I can see her screen and she
can't
click on her forward button.
it won't let me go. Right,
Yeah.
okay. No, still won't let me go. Okay, there's only one last slide. The last slide was about apprenticeships, and what I just wanted again just to share with you on that was that so we've got the traditional approach where you've got young people that are coming into the council, maybe starting their career, or people restarting their career. But we're also now making sure that we're using apprenticeships wherever we can with regards to how we develop people within their careers, because apprenticeship levy can be used for that as well. So it's just looking for all opportunities wherever we possibly can to, as I say, make sure that we're using that apprenticeship levy as much as possible. I'm going to probably have problems now unsharing, but I will do my best to unshare, but I will wait until any questions, and hopefully I can go back to any slides that people want.
Okay, thanks, Louise. Yeah, I think first just to say that we're not here to do what the Personnel Board does, because they do, very clever work. So we're not really going to delve into that. So yeah, questions, Pauline.
Thank you very much. Firstly, I'd like to congratulate Louise and Rachel actually for the progress you've made. I think you've done a really good job in terms of improving the whole professionalism of the recruitment and the HR. So well done. I think you're doing a great job. I've got a couple of questions though, as always. First thing, are you monitoring cost per hire, and have you seen any trends one way or another? That would be useful to know if you're not already.
It is something we are starting to do some more detail on, and we're just preparing our first recruitment report to come into Personnel Board, which will have even more detail than I've got here. So we are starting to build that data set. A lot of it has been where now we've done the year, we've got the data set of the year that we can start to compare with, but noted, and I will take that away as something to look at and add into, because it is good information to have.
Yeah, thank you. And that's the total cost, not just the advertising cost.
No.
That's also the staff involved all the time.
Yeah.
All the interviews, all that sort of stuff. I'm interested to know, £129,000 saved, what proportion of the total spend is that? I'd like to understand what percentage of your offers are accepted. And I'm wondering when you can wean yourselves off the local government journal and the Guardian and get completely onto LinkedIn, saving you huge amounts of advert costs for each one of those adverts.
So with regard to the 129,000, it's not, we don't have a budget, so those costs would have to come from the service. So what we're doing is we're saving those sort of, it's invest to save, I suppose. We would have had to have spent that money to do it, but I probably need to just have a quick look, because as I say, it's not we don't have a recruitment budget as such.
So I think the question then is, if you don't have the figure to hand, I'd be interested later, but how much have you spent? So is 129,000 10%, 50%,
yeah, I understand.
2%, or what?
Yeah, I'll
Put it
get
in
that.
Context.
Yeah.
And it'd be interesting to see the trend of that spend as well.
The one thing, Councillor, I can definitely confirm is that the way that we're using social media has increased. So I can definitely get that spend and make sure it's included in the personnel board report, which we'll bring in March, and make sure that that's in there. Because what we're doing, as you say, is using social media wherever we can, so that it does. I have to say the cost is so much lower than the traditional methods of recruiting, of advertising. The MJ and the Guardian, we tend to only now use for targeted or very specific jobs, but we are then now measuring what's the return on that, where are the people coming from, so that again, as we build our reporting around this, we can say, you're right, there's no point. Is it there just to tell people that we are looking for this job, or are we actually looking for that return? And honestly, we're looking for the return. And I'd have to say LinkedIn is definitely the way we're going. We've also used LinkedIn to actually approach people, which is probably a little bit different for a council to do. So our lead on resourcing will approach, so especially if we're looking for directors, etc. So because often on LinkedIn people can say they're open to hire and open to new posts. I think there was a couple of other things there, wasn't there?
It was the percentage of acceptance of roles was the other question.
I don't know that off the top of my head. I would have to have it. I think it's quite high, but I will double check. That.
Yeah, certainly my experience is that most modern organisations barely advertise anywhere other than using LinkedIn. It's I haven't seen an advert apart from a general "look at me, I'm a wonderful organisation" type advert rather than a specific. They don't generally use those things anymore. So I think my recollection was it was about £5,000 a time. So it's something to look at. But thank you very much. But good job. Thank you.
Okay, Caroline.
Thank you very much. That's very good. I was just wondering, having given a person a job, how many stay on after their probation period?
We do have actually quite a high rate of people staying. Obviously, we do need to make sure that that's right for the council as much as for the individual. But as I've said, our retention rates are definitely our turnover rates, let's get that right, don't get your words around the wrong way, Louise. The turnover rates have definitely started to come down. So we are seeing quite an improvement with people staying in post.
It sounds like you're matching the adverts to the right people. So obviously that helps that they're staying on past, because it all takes time, but
Absolutely.
That sounds good. Thank you.
That's right.
Okay, Adrian.
Yeah, do you think you've got the full buy-in of the leadership team to the changes? I noticed when I read the slides, it seemed to be a sort of reframing of the HR area as a whole, really. Do you think you've got the full buy-in? Is there anything else you need?
Thank you for the question. I'd say I have, yes. I work very closely with Councillor Bishop Firth. We're always looking for new opportunities with regard to how to approach HR. She challenges me, and I'm quite lucky in the fact that it's her profession. So it works really quite well. I also think personnel board are very good at that as well from that perspective, and it's how we're working together, because I think one thing I do tend to find from committee is that we can learn because everyone has different experiences, and it's those things. And tonight, if people have got different ideas that they want us to look at, I'm always open to looking at different ways of approaching things. With regard to our senior management team, I have complete and utter support, and I have to say they had the confidence in the team for us to go out and recruit the Director of Children's Services, and they were a little bit reticent because it's a big role. All roles are important, please don't get me wrong, but it's a statutory post. It's time consuming when you're going out for a big role. There's a big commitment from quite a lot of people in that recruitment process, but the directors actually worked with us on a sort of week by week basis to sort of look at progress and how they could help. So I would say yes, we do have that absolute support.
Second question. I work for I would call them an enlightened company that provides additional childcare support. So for the past 2-3 years, I've been asking at HOSC meetings when I get adult social care representatives if there is any chance that in the workforce plan that at some point there can be movement towards helping people, families or individuals with childcare. And the reason I ask is because it works where I work, especially the female colleagues tend to stay where their children are supported. And I think in adult social care, it's around 80% of the staff are female, I think, something like that.
Yeah.
So it's highly likely as a society, we normally give the caring responsibilities to females in relationships. And I want to see them better supported. So they are better supported, so that they are able to give their best when they're working, but also able to think about their families when they're not working. And so this for me is an important issue. And I've never really got a solid answer about whether anything would be planned or thought of. But for me, it's important that we take care of the staff, not only while they're at work, but while they're not at work. And you know what it's like with mental health, that if you're struggling to fit your hours in with childcare responsibilities and everything else, it becomes overly burdensome, and then you get into mental health crises. So I think for the health of all workers, we need to have a more patrician or matrician, maybe, view of the people that work for us and their families. So I'm keen that our workers can get some help in that area. It's a very long statement and a very long question, but if you could maybe take it away and think about if there's any way forward with this topic. I'm very keen to reduce the churn in adult social care.
Yep.
I'm very keen to enable women to work when they want in a flexible way so they can pick up their kids and all that.
If okay, Chair, just to confirm, actually, I met with the adult social care team led by Lorna Pearce, where they're reviewing the workforce strategy around adult social care to ensure that we're joined up corporately on the offer. And they actually mentioned that was an item that had come up at HOSC, and that whether or not corporately we could look at that as a whole. I think, one of the important things that we would need to look at is sort of start to understand how many would be interested in obviously such an offer. I suppose I know there's a lot of items tonight, so I'll just sort of say I can confirm that we are going to look at that, and we're going to look at a big review of all of our benefits right across the council. This is again part of our workforce programme, so that we will look at all elements. Can't promise we'll set something up, but we may come up with an alternative that might work well. But I take on the sentiment and absolutely make sure that's fed into what we're doing.
That's the best answer I've ever received. Thank you very much.
I think it's fair to say as well. Sorry, can people hear me? I'm a bit of a distance from the mic. But I think some of the things that Louise is working on, for example, with modern workforce, which takes an approach to working, which puts the resident first, but then looks at what we can also do to provide flexibility to staff around resident need and meeting the residents' needs. That is probably a very powerful way of delivering flexibility to working families. Childcare itself is obviously very, very expensive. It's a huge part of a lot of families' budgets. What we used to look at as employers, maybe back in the 80s, maybe the early 90s, with trying to provide childcare on site, for example, is a very, very expensive option that very few workforces can afford. But there are certainly other things that we can do around providing people with flexibility where that's possible in their job, promoting to people, for example, there are some tax benefits for people who need childcare, which can be very powerful sources of support for working parents.
Thank you.
Okay, Phil.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, excuse me a second, I have to apologise for being late, Chair. Secondly, I have to declare that I am a director of a local recruitment consultancy, and so I want to know if that we transact no business with WBC. Does that preclude me from asking questions?
No, I don't think so. I think if you declare an interest, then you're okay to carry on.
Thank you. I was wondering, you have got your dedicated resourcing team. You say that it's improved value. Is that improved value measured against the 129,000 that you've saved in recruitment costs from external agencies, or is that can we see that in another way as well?
I think there are definitely more savings than I've been probably quite conservative with some of that, with those numbers, because first of all, I don't want to sort of say that we made a saving when we haven't. I need to see that it's actually real. But I think perhaps what I need to do and reconsider for when we come back for another meeting, I think we need to look at savings in a little bit more detail, so that again it's sort of included within the pack, because I think time is a massive saving, and I could attribute where we've reduced the amount of time from, I suppose from advert to recruitment, that I can attribute a saving. I can attribute savings to our advertising costs, definitely, because we've been using new and different methods. So I think I've probably missed a bit of a trick there with regards to not making sure, not including some of that information. So I learn, and I always learn. So next time when I relook at this, I will make sure there's a bit more of that type of information included in the report. But we're looking at savings wherever we can. It's always about how do we make the process as smart as we possibly can, using the people for the least amount of time needed. So again, the process uses itself, so that again, it's a less time for people to actually recruit in. Shortlisting is something we probably need to do some improvement on, and I think again for managers, I think they would like to see us look at that area. So those are areas where we can make further improvements.
Excellent, thank you. And I was looking that, so I presumed that the resourcing team was something to do with the reduced number of adverts that you'd had to place for the same number. And I wondered, how many vacancies have you actually filled with those 361? Is it one job advert for vacancy, or has there been re-advertisement of jobs that you can't fill?
That's definitely where we've brought the reduction down. So what we're finding is we're going out once, and we are actually then able to recruit, because we're getting the right quality candidates for managers to have the confidence to recruit. However, having said that, we will still advise a manager if they have not got the right standard or quality of person. Obviously, you can always look at development opportunities, and there may be someone there that's got the sort of, they're nearly there, so you can bring them on through development. But I would probably always advise that we make sure that it's the right person doing the job. But again, I probably need to add that into my stats with regard to those costings, because it's definitely where we've got a reduction, because that's why the 400 compared to the 300, I think, is that's where there were often jobs having to go out multiple times. So it wasn't that they were individual jobs, they were having to go out multiple times because they weren't being successful. I do know that as fact.
Thank you. Yeah, value added is really important. So the last question I think that I've got for the moment is, how many vacancies have you had, looking at the time that it takes from advert go live? how many vacancies have you had, or have you still got, that have been open for more than 3 months? And have you got if there are a number, then do you have a strategy to fill those?
So we do have some hard to recruit roles. I'm going to say I don't know that all off the top of my head. I will confess to that, but it's something I can get quite easily and provide the committee. But what we do look at is this is where we then get into some specific campaigns, and where we're now looking at using LinkedIn, as I said, to sort of target and see whether or not we can actually approach candidates, which is probably something we haven't done as a council. And I appreciate in the role you do, you absolutely understand what I mean. But the person we recruited came from an agency themselves, so come from private sector, got a bit of a different skill set, and we are using that as best we can. So it's the combination of using that expertise and the expertise in the department and the service where they know their own profession, and it's bringing that information together to then target the right places to try and get people.
Andrew.
Yes, thank you, Louise, for a really, really clear and informative presentation, and for your answers to the questions this evening. The matter of flexible working has been raised in a couple of different contexts already this evening, and I noted on page 26 under policy review that there isn't a specific reference to flexible working, including things like job shares and so forth. I'm wondering, do we have such a policy in the council at the moment, or is that list on that page simply policies that are up for review shortly?
Those are just probably a few of the policies that I've named, but the modern workforce, it sort of captures, it's one statement, but it captures a number of different areas. Good. We do have a flexible working policy, and we also have flexi time as well. So we look at all the different ways that we can be attractive to different people with different needs with regard to what they need out of a job. But I think, again, this is something which, as a team, we are reviewing, and we will keep under constant review. And that's definitely what we work with Personnel Board on. So all policies and reviews go through them with regard to any work on that.
Excellent, thank you for that. And also, sticking with the same slide under health and wellbeing offer, I have a very specific or a question about a very specific group within the workforce, but I suspect that it may apply more widely, and that is within children's services. A little while ago, we had a really, really productive meeting with the Overview and Scrutiny Committee with a number of our social workers, and it was, and you may have been in attendance, Louise. No,
I don't think I was on that occasion, Councillor.
Yeah, well, it was really, really productive. But one of the matters that they raised, and this is where I suspect it applies to other parts of the council as well, is that many of them are having, because of the nature of their work, to be coming into and out of shoot end sometimes multiple times during the day, and that the current car parking arrangements, often involving parking in Carnival Pool, have a really big impact on their on their productivity, frustration levels and so forth. So it is something which we have raised as an overview, as a Children's Services Overview and Scrutiny Committee. We haven't as yet had a satisfactory resolution to this, although a number of suggestions have been made, as to how this might be, looked at.
Again, I can confirm. So we're working with colleagues in place and growth in car parking. So we're working together because we are very aware, and the union also have been. We've spoken to the union on many occasions as well around car parking and the impact it has on people's roles on a day-to-day basis. We're probably going a little bit slower than perhaps I would like on that particular item, but it's quite complex in the fact of it's as much about understanding what car parking need as much as the workforce need, and it's making sure we get the right balance. But to be fair, they're working they're working with us, and I hope that we'll start to resolve that issue with staff, and that we start to turn that problem around. And I think it's just about reviewing who are perhaps using the car park that is closer to the offices. I think the other thing just to mention, through the modern workforce, again, I keep mentioning this item, but it's quite an important one. So again, through modern workforce, we've got sort of 3 contract types. So what we're looking there is to be very then specific then about a person's contract, obviously very much centred on what they deliver for the community, and then what resources they then need to help them to actually undertake their role. So I just want to say that it's absolutely not being ignored. Car parking, I think, is always something, I think wherever I have worked, it's always been something that doesn't sometimes quite work for the workforce, but it's sort of understanding the balance between our community and the fact that needs to be there for our community as an income, but equally understanding that the service that needs to be obviously delivered out to that community as well.
Thank you. And one final question, if I may, and it's really one of the elephants in the room, but it's rather a big elephant, I'm afraid, and it's the cost of living, in this part of England, and all the related, the related matters, including, again, in some parts of the council, quite significant, I believe, wage differentials between some of our council employees and those doing similar work role, under or for an agency. So I'd just be really interested for any comments that you can make, about how the council, is trying to address these issues, which of course also not only may have a significant impact on service delivery, but also on the welfare, of our employees.
So again, obviously, cost of living, I appreciate. We are looking at obviously different initiatives that we can obviously try and help with our staff. And I'm going to forget it's Boom, isn't it? Sorry, the credit company that we're
Boom. Yes.
So
yeah.
where they so we're looking at trying to set up some, sorry, do you know when your brain goes a bit blank? So we're trying to look at some different initiatives that we could offer for our workforce. So again, this is something through the credit union, where we may set up a way for savings, etc., and a simple way of doing that. Appreciate it will be it's one element that we're looking at. But with regard to pay and reward for our staff, we do a huge amount of benchmarking on a very regular basis, because from the point of view of understanding where we sit in the market, we have to be competitive, but at the same time understand that we have a budget to work within, which can be, as I say, quite difficult. We're looking at wherever we can to reduce the use of sort of what I'd call a higher agency spend, and looking to make sure that we are actually hiring people permanently into roles. And again, I think hopefully I've demonstrated what we're looking to do around that. I think there's probably more we can do, and I'm not going to sort of say that I've got all of the answers around this, but we do have signposting as well on our website that we obviously make sure that our staff are aware of, as much as the community, around where they may need to get help. And obviously it's sort of making sure that people have got sort of well-being and places where they can go and talk to people. So again, through our employee assistance program, it's again also sort of making sure that if they need sort of support around debt, etc., again, there are places where they can go and speak to people. I'm not sure if I've given a full enough answer, but I think what I'm trying to say is something that we do obviously are very mindful of. Minimum wage rates, etc. National minimum wage. We're also obviously through, because we're national sort of terms and conditions, we will always make sure that we are meeting those requirements. But I think it's again just working with our workforce as well, just to make sure that ideas and things that they want to see are also included in the offer.
No, thank you for that.
And I think it's worth once again mentioning modern workforce, because I think the flexibility provided to at least some categories of staff where it's possible around resident need through modern workforce ways of working, actually that can help people very, very considerably with the cost of living crisis.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you. Just referring to page 20 on your improvements, and to be blunt, I'm impressed. And I look at this at the bottom line for just your advertisements was a 33% improvement, and counting the advertisements over the time and the number of applicants, etc. I put a bottom end of that saying you've made a 25% improvement in performance and possibly towards savings as well. So the leading question is, do you think you've reached the peak, you bottomed out, or do you think there's still room that to grow into to improve?
I definitely think there's more improvement that we can make, and I think that's what we need to be able to demonstrate, because I think we need to be able to demonstrate why we have that team in place. So I think it's why it's important that, and I'm very happy to come to overview and scrutiny, but we also be reporting that back through personnel board to again make sure that they can see the value added. And I remember when I first started, it was something that councillors were really keen to sort of see and understand, that we can make that improvement. As I say, we're a year in, but I'd like to see that come down further and maybe different mechanisms that we can use. We may not see the number of working days come down quite as considerably. We might not see quite such a cut. But again, I still think there's always room for improvement.
Thanks. And thank you for the enthusiasm that you put into this. Pauline?
Thank you. Just to finish, as far as I'm concerned, looking at page 27, seeing as it's Apprentice Week. Nice to see the apprentice, and I understand you guys lead for Berkshire in terms of the apprentice schemes, so that's great. What percentage of, I'm very much in favour of apprenticeships, just to be clear. I've set a couple up myself, and I'm very, very keen to give people that opportunity. What percentage of apprentices become permanent employees?
We actually have got I have got a few statistics, because I thought that might come up this evening. We've got a report, just so you know, coming to the personnel board in February, which is very specifically around apprenticeships. But just a couple of examples. So I think we had 10 complete the ASYE qualification, and 9 people have stayed on and continue to work. And similarly, 5 did the social worker apprenticeship, and 4 have remained. We even have an example where somebody completed their apprenticeship, left Wokingham, and have since, I think they returned yesterday, and come back. I can get more information on that. I appreciate I've only gone into the social care areas, but we are starting to see that this is a method of growing our own, because it's not just about the apprenticeship, it's then hopefully then seeing sort of a younger, maybe in some places a younger person joining the council, because as I say, not everybody understands what the council does. And again, through career fairs, we're also now going to career fairs and promoting what it is that we actually do and offer.
And I think that's a very important point. I mean, we've got a very wide variety of customers, for want of a better word, so it's good to have a variety of staff to face on to them. The other thing I was just thinking was, I think it's important to understand what people actually want in terms of terms and conditions, rather than us sitting here saying, oh, they need this, they need that, they need the other. I don't think everybody's the same, and I do think, I presume you're doing a workforce survey to understand what people actually value and what they don't value before we chuck a load of money at the wrong thing, because there's only a certain amount of money you can spend.
Absolutely. So we've in our programme in September, we're just working it up now, but we will go out with a full employee survey, and we'll be looking at different areas around this, because you're right, you shouldn't always tell your workforce. If we want it to be an open culture, transparency, I want to hear from what the workforce actually want to see. We may not be able to bring everything, but I bet we can bring some, bring forward a number of ideas. I think that came true of the aspiring manager course that we're looking to introduce. It's just a really good way for those people that are looking to want to step up. How do I do that? And as I say, we need to be there to help them to do that.
And excuse me for asking this because I'm a bit out of date, but do we get money back from the apprentice levy now?
We as in,
or do you not pay it? I don't.
No, so we have to pay so much
exactly.
per employee.
Yeah.
So we don't spend all of our levy, but we are doing our utmost. I think we've got 80 live apprentices at the moment. That's through schools as well. And again, I'll have that detail for you.
It'd be interesting to know that we're maximising that. In terms
we are doing
getting
absolutely
the money back.
everything, and that's something that we are so keen on, and that was why I wanted just to share that we're not just looking at the traditional route of using an apprentice and how we can, as I say, grow people and develop people, because I think it's just so important.
And to be clear, the apprentice levy is not a levy on apprentices, before anybody gets the wrong idea. It's a levy that's taken in order to spend to encourage apprenticeships.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, thanks.
Okay, before Andy, could you just ASYE could was used? Oh right, okay, that's right.
It's a very specific qualification in social care, and I should note that. That's so bad of me. My brain doesn't always retain everything like it used to. I'm sorry.
Okay, Andy.
And thank you for the presentation. So I've got a couple of questions. The first one, I just want to follow up on something you said, and you might perhaps not know the answer. You're talking about the savings, and you were saying that you don't have a budget, so the savings went from your budget. So does that mean that the budget for agency costs sits within the directorate, or are we saying there are no agency costs budgeted for at all in the organisation?
They sit out in the directorate. This sits out more specifically in the directorates. I think the HR, when the HR team came back, sort of I suppose sort of rejuvenated it back in 2022, the budgets had sort of diminished because everything had been self-serve and it'd been pushed out into the directorates. So that's why it's paid from the different directorates. So I can be a little bit more explicit about that and just sort of check myself just to make sure that I've got that absolutely right. But that's how. If we're using an agency, it comes from the directorate that is recruiting.
Cool. I understand that. I just wanted to check that the directorates did actually have a budget.
As I understand it, yes.
Not to budget for.
As I understand it, yes, they do, because I think that's where the budget was pushed out. But I would need to double check.
Okay. So next then. One thing which wasn't in the retention part was culture, and there's a lot of emphasis on projects, and I've got a couple of examples of where I've been told about things which probably are being missed in this, which will affect retention. So, for example, I know that in terms of the flexible working, that flexibility needs to be two-way, and I know that some officers see the flexible working as a way of forcing them out of shoot end and having to work at home when they don't want to work at home, and that's what I've been told. And in other cases, they're being forced to work. I understand the reason for closing down a couple of the floors, but they're being forced to work in parts of the building which are crowded, and they just don't like it. So we're talking about flexibility and a good thing, but that needs to be a two-way thing, where the wishes of officers need to be respected, and I know some feel that it's not being respected, and their wishes to work in the office aren't being respected. So that I guess is not a question there, and it's difficult to present that sort of thing here, but
Yeah, I would, as I say, the challenge is always welcome, and I think there probably will be absolutely people that prefer to come into the office. I think what we probably need to do is, again, and I feel like I'm repeating myself, but there's a lot covered in this area. So the modern workforce, again, it will be a consultation. So it won't be, so we are identifying worker types. And it is about obviously identifying jobs which you could predominantly work from home. But the health and well-being has also got to be considered. So for some people, I appreciate making them work from home where they then have no interaction if they don't have that sort of job wouldn't be correct. So I suppose the big commitment I would make with you is that I'm very keen to work with all of our employees in the workforce and all the individual teams. Sometimes we won't always meet the needs of everybody, but we will go as far as we possibly can to make sure that I suppose our workforce feel valued and that they are undertaking that work in a positive environment.
Yeah, that's for some people who've spoken to me, that's certainly not how they're feeling at the moment.
Please encourage them to, if they want to, raise it through some form of method, because it's always good to understand where those people are working, because I can't really do much about it if I don't know the detail. I appreciate for some that's difficult, but I really want to encourage people to feel they can come and talk to us, send me an email. It's not about necessarily naming and shaming people, but it's maybe working with the individual.
A fear there of sticking one's head above the parapet too much.
I want the culture.
I can imagine in their teams, and perhaps their team leader or whatever the term is probably aware of it, but the sense I got was they didn't think it was worth it because of the
well, as I say, we want to engender a positive culture where people feel they can come and have that conversation. We may not, as I say, always be able to give everybody what they would like, but we will always work to our best to try and come up with a compromise somewhere along the line, perhaps. Because, as I say, I actually also know that's very important right through to senior management and understanding that people feel like that.
Yeah, because sort of in a similar sort of vein, again, I was also told of someone one of the employees who left the organisation because they were encouraged to apply. They thought for a position and then they didn't get the position. And in terms of developing your future talent, your promotion strategy, all of that sort of stuff, it just seems, that just seems such a waste of that person's time. And there was presumably a recruitment exercise that went on as well. So again, this is a very top level presentation, and I guess both the things I've asked are about culture. Are we sure that we're getting the culture right? I think it's a fantastic presentation, lots of positive achievements, but beneath that there must be a corporate culture, and I can't see anything about how the corporate culture is improving or getting better. And I think when we've looked at this before, I've said that it would be great to have some sort of input or feedback from the unions.
Yep.
Because if anything, they're the people the union reps are the ones who are getting the sharp end of where people aren't happy with what's happening culturally.
Yeah. I can confirm we now have a regular meeting with the unions. That the unions also meet with us and Susan as well. Just again, because it is important. The unions are great at sharing examples with us of what are these sort of types of situation. I'm going to sort of probably say that I think we're on a bit of and it's a bit of a cliche, we're on a bit of a journey. We've got a lot of work to do, maybe some improvement. I still think the organisation is going through quite a lot of change with the style of working, and for some people have adapted to that straight away, and others they maybe never will because they're very used to the way that they work. But the really important part that you're mentioning there around our culture. So I'm just at the moment, and we're just drafting the first people strategy. And again, that will be shared and consulted on. But being a people-focused culture is right, at the centre of that. And it's, again, we were in a meeting today and someone was saying, oh, I'm a bit of a disruptor and it's sort of saying, we want that. We need that. you know, because otherwise you will just sit there and you will think, yes, you're doing the right thing. So we need people to feel that they can disrupt things and say things and speak up. I can't really demonstrate much more than that at the moment, but I absolutely, hopefully once you start to see that people's strategy, and I'll be again sharing that with, and that will be signed off by the personnel board, obviously we'll be looking for councillor input into that. So again, hopefully we'll start to see a change, and we're very much wanting to work towards that.
Okay, and then the final question, sorry, is thinking about when people do leave, again, thinking about the retention side of it. Do we conduct exit interviews? Do we know why people are leaving?
We do conduct exit interviews. Again, we're looking at improving that process. We try now to make sure everybody is offered an exit interview, because again, we can learn so much from people's experiences. So yes, we do. Yes, we probably need to, again, look at how do we improve that, and then how are we using the learning? And it's making sure we're using the learning and feeding that back into our processes.
Thank you.
Okay, Phil.
Thank you. Yes, just for clarity, my profession is mental health, and I just happen to be an investor in a recruitment organisation. I was actually thinking on a similar line as to what Councillor Croy has been asking. How in this modern environment are you promoting team working and team spirit? I understand that you're just embarking on a journey, as you said, and you're just about to do a big staff survey, would be really good. But one of the things that we've been working on with local employers through our service is the development of positive mental health, and not just dealing with negative mental health and mental health problems. And I wonder if you have A, considered how you can do that, and B, if you have a budget put aside in order to encourage that, because the worst thing is to be part of a team and not to be part of it.
Again, through our wellbeing offer, I would say it's again something we could improve on, and we can do some further work around. We have our mental health first aiders, and that's something that we quite strongly promote through the organisation. And we also look to do that through, we call it the big chat, whereby we come together virtually, but that's usually chaired, Susan tends to lead, and then there's a number of speakers, and often in the past we've definitely talked about around mental health and people sharing those experiences. That's one mechanism. We've got quite a lot of different engagement mechanisms that we're trying to use. We're also looking at a colleague conference whereby we bring people in face to face, and again how we can then look at, I suppose, different initiatives around, especially around mental health. But I'm always open to learn what others are doing. So if you have anything you can share and we can look at, I'm very happy to take that on board and look at it.
That's great, thank you. I mean, I'll leave you with a comment on that question, which is that poor mental health is generally accompanied by sickness and absence. Agreed. And good mental health is generally accompanied by much better efficiency and working. One other question, which is also related to something that Councillor Croy raised, which is, have you got or have you considered or would you consider speak up champions, so that people feel that they can speak to somebody about an issue, whether it be an issue to do with their role or a concern about efficiency or the way something is done, without having to face the blame or the challenge of a line manager?
I would absolutely look at that as an initiative. Where I came from previously, we did a lot of I say training. It's probably an event we put on where we I think we arm people with a toolkit for Speak Up, as in different methods that they can use. So I think there's a lot of different work that we can do, and especially just listening to some of obviously the examples that have been shared this evening. I'm very open to that, and as I say, I'm very happy to have a look at that as an idea and move forward with it.
Okay, thank you. So I think we might have some recommendations that Andrew's going to talk us through?
Yes, thank you, Chair. And as I'm wont to do, as I listen to the discussion, I jot down points that people have raised, that you may wish to develop into recommendations. Before we have a look at the specific recommendations to be considered this evening, there's been an enormous number, of points, really important points and responses given on a whole range of matters, from engagement with trade unions to speak up champions, to the flexibility, to matters to do with the flexibility, being a two-way matter, and all of those points have been minuted, okay, along with the responses, okay, and will be there for the HR team, the executive member, and the wider audience, to consider and to act upon. So, but specific recommendations, okay, the first two are really important but fairly routine. The first is that the committee expresses its thanks to Louise and to Rachel for attending this evening and for their presentations and for discussing these matters with us. The second recommendation is that the committee notes the update that was presented in the form of the slides. Now, I'd like to suggest two recommendations, okay, further recommendations. And the first of these is that the committee notes the council's, I think it's called Modern Workforce Plan, and would support efforts by the HR team and the executive to explore corporate possibilities for supporting childcare for our employees. We'll rely on Neil to sort of finesse the wording, but has that captured what the intention is?
I think one of the points I made right at the beginning is we shouldn't presume what people want. So I think we should have a recommendation that's a bit wider, that says that understands what attracts employees and puts the appropriate changes in place, e.g. childcare. But I don't think we should nail it down to that, because you might find there's other things that they would value more. And I think what you're doing with your recommendation is making it far too specific.
Perhaps we could include what you have just said as a separate recommendation to go before the specific one about childcare.
I'm certainly not happy about having specifics without having asked people what they actually want.
No. So the first recommendation, it would be number 3, would be to, okay, help us out, Rachel.
I was actually going to come in a little bit afterwards, possibly, but just to say that when we're looking at the issue of childcare and of supporting families, to certainly keep that quite broad. Because there are lots of different ways in which you can support families. So, for example, very often parents prefer to have their own childcare provider who is close to where they live, as opposed to, for example, the council trying to provide childcare, whether it's provide childcare themselves or provide links to local childcare. That solution doesn't work for everybody. So I think I would keep it quite broad, and maybe look at ways that we can best support working parents, to attract and retain working parents as staff in our organisation. And I'm looking at Adrian, who was the one who raised this initially.
I think it's not just, I use the word carer because it's also, we had that fantastic presentation at full council, where you have the combination of, yes, there's a young person involved, but the carer who's looking after the young person is also caring for an aged mother who's got dementia and who's in the same house. So I think it's carers in general. It's not just parents. I think you need to say parents or carers to cover everybody.
Pauline,
So I'd like to go back to Rachel's suggestion, which I think is the right one, which is that we look to help working people with responsibilities, I think it is, outside work, to encourage them and to help them maintain and develop their employment. It's that sort of thing. I really don't want to be specific because you've only got a certain amount of money that you can spend on this. There isn't a magic money tree anywhere, and you've got to find the right thing that will help the maximum number of people and attract the maximum number of people, rather than going in with a preconceived idea that everybody wants a bicycle voucher or whatever it is, and or indeed childcare, and that isn't the right answer for this particular workforce. So I would prefer very much to steer away from specifics.
Just one further point. Obviously, we always talk about costs, and costs are important, but ultimately it's about the people. And somebody that's engaged over a long period of time in a job feels an attachment, a steadiness to the job, and that's to be encouraged. But we also need to think about the numbers. So, for example, if it costs us, I don't know, £20,000 to recruit somebody in a year, and you're getting a churn in that role, and we could offer some kind of childcare at £10,000, obviously there would be a net saving of £10,000 because you're not incurring the cost of the recruitment process.
Okay, can I make a suggestion based on Rachel, and then I'll make a suggestion based on what we've heard. Okay.
Super, thank you. Sorry, we're sharing a microphone here. I actually have written down now, and this may or may not be helpful, but we should look at what we as a council could do to support employees who've got caring responsibilities to help us with recruitment and retention. Yeah. Fantastic, thank you.
Absolutely. Okay. And I did write down caring responsibilities. I copied that from somebody, so that's good. Okay, so that's recommendation number 3. Recommendation 4. Okay. This goes right back to the start of the meeting. And the committee would support or supports the collection of data, including cost per hire data, and the total recruitment spend as part of the data set going to the personnel board. Okay. These are just examples of the kinds of data that would be included in that data set. Okay, but I think that was considered, to be quite an important issue. So they were the 4 recommendations that I'd written down. Does anybody have any others?
Andy.
Yeah, it's just a comment really. As an overview and scrutiny committee, we're supposed to be providing recommendations to the executive where there might be a little bit of a challenge. And now we've got members of the executive coming here and dictating, not as in telling us what to do, but reading out for us recommendations. So it seems a bit pointless if the member's sitting there and she's already agreed she wants to do it. What is the point in us recommending it? That is not the point of scrutiny. It's to reinforce to her what she wants to do already. With the greatest of respect, Rachel, sorry, it's just we're getting it wrong as a committee. This is just absurd, frankly.
I think in this instance, Rachel did us a great service, by putting into words, the views of the committee. So in this instance, I don't have a problem with that.
No, neither do I. And I would say that it's much better to have an executive member who's willing to do the recommendations that we have than be trying to force an executive member who doesn't want to do them to do the things we want. So be careful what you wish for.
Shall I add as well that I absolutely did not come to overview and scrutiny with any kind of preconceived idea whatsoever. I think Adrian raised the issue. It was generally discussed, very much borrowed on what Pauline was saying to refine the thinking. And I can promise you, Andy, I'll be going out of here tonight with something that I didn't expect to have when I walked in, and it has been part of we've had some really great suggestions, really great challenge. I've been writing away in my books and things that Louise and I can talk about outside of this meeting to improve what we bring to personnel board and what we can bring to our employees.
That's very reassuring. Thank you.
So, right, okay, so are we happy with the recommendations?
We need a proposer.
Okay, Chris propose, Paul in second, who in favour? Okay, thanks, that's unanimous, I think. So, thank you very much, Louise and Rachel, for a great presentation. Right, moving on to air quality. It's right, so we have oh yeah, Ian Shenton's online, the executive member, and then we have in the room Steve Brown, Emma Charles, and Dorinda Barr.
Emma will be presenting.
Oh, right, Emma is going to present this. Thank you very much.
So I'm bringing to you today an update on air quality for Wokingham. Brought together a fair amount of information, and I've tried to.
Sorry, Chair, can I ask a question?
Okay.
For a resident viewing this later online, how are they going to know what the slides look like if they don't see the slides and they haven't got a written pack?
The agendas are published online, so people can follow the agenda with the. Okay.
Which page you're talking? Otherwise,
Yeah.
you can show it.
Yeah. Okay, but we have, okay, so for anyone online, just thank you, Adrian, just to say that there is a 120-page report here, and it's available via the website through the meeting link. The whole pack is there.
Okay, so I've not provided slides as such, but I will take through particular pages that I'm referring to as I go. So I'm bringing to you, referring to 29, page 29, I'm bringing to you a looking back on air quality, a look at the annual status report that was produced in June 2023, which relates to air quality data for 2022. That includes information relating to the Air Quality Action Plan implementation and review. Then I'm also giving you a sort of a looking forward, which is the outcomes of the data that is being collected and the appraisal by DEFRA, which is leading towards the potential for the revocation of air quality management areas, the need for a revised Air Quality Action Plan. Then also looking at the air quality monitoring and assessment that we're going to be continuing, and when the next ASR is to be produced, and just an idea on potentially the governance and scrutiny arrangements going forward. So on page 30 of the report, I provide a summary of the report. I identify that there are 3 air quality management areas that have already been identified within Wokingham, and each year we're required to produce an annual status report. That's then submitted to DEFRA, and we then get a report back from DEFRA as to their findings on our annual appraisal. The findings within the appraisal for last year, although they were satisfied with the data that had been collected, they weren't entirely satisfied with the conclusions made, and they considered that there was sufficient evidence to proceed to consider revoking 2 of the AQMAs. one of which is in along the M4 and the other one is within Twyford Crossroads area. When I first wrote the report, that was due to go to executive on the 25th, and I've noted later in the report that it has gone to executive on the 25th, and it was decided that we would be able to proceed to the revocation of 2 AQMAs. The next annual status report, which is due for completion in June, July of this year, and we expect that DEFRA will provide a response to that in approximately August. In the meantime, we will still be required to have an air quality management area because we have, an air quality action plan, because we will have a retained air quality management area in Wokingham Town Centre. We are aligning that action plan with the current local transport plan, which is currently under consultation. So that is the outline of the documents within the report. One thing perhaps to bring to your attention in terms of our ongoing monitoring, as I said, we are going to be continuing to do that. And this will be carrying on in locations that have been air quality management areas. And that monitoring will just be taking a slightly different form to the level of the monitoring that was undertaken before.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, so perhaps you just explain the air quality management. That was continuous monitoring. Equipment was continuously there, but what you'll be moving to is a sort of periodic monitoring. Is that but on the same sites, but with. So
what we have been doing is, sorry, I didn't turn that off before. What we have been doing is utilising automatic monitoring, and that is continuously collecting the data. Alongside that, we also do non-automatic monitoring, which uses a passive form of monitoring, and we have that located in lots of locations as well. So each of those tube locations will still be continuing.
Okay, thanks. Andy.
And thank you for such a thorough report. I really enjoyed reading most of it. I didn't enjoy it. I've read most of what I think the important bits. And it's good news that we're going to get rid of the 2 of the air quality management areas. But I was wondering about what Wokingham and what sort of Wokingham specific actions are going to be taken to try and get down, to try and improve the air quality. Because I know that in terms of the general actions taken, they have been either very specific actions, such as the Woodley Cycleway or the Winnish Relief Road, which are nowhere near Wokingham, or they're very general, vague, borough-wide things, which probably won't affect air quality in Wokingham either, such as the Lucy Whip. You know, I can't see anything in there which is going to improve air quality in Wokingham. So can you give me a sense of what is going to happen in Wokingham that is going to improve the air quality, please?
Okay, so I'm currently involved with the working group on drawing out additional actions. We weren't quite expecting this to be the outcome of last year's report. We were obviously thinking we were going in a direction of continuing with moving forward on all of the actions. We still will have a responsibility to maintain. So we still have to look at the whole area, but I think we have to have a close look at what else might be needed in Wokingham Town Centre. I would just draw to your attention that we are compliant at all monitoring locations within Wokingham Town Centre as at 22, but where we are using a diffusion tube in one location, we're using them in other locations as well that are below 36, but at one location we're at a level of concern. So it's just slightly over a level that we can think that we're definitely meeting the objective comfortably. And when you use diffusion tubes, you have a slight difference of allowance. You're looking at 36, you might have a level of concern. The objective level is 40. So we're meeting it, but there still might be a little bit more we have to do in that area. So I think we're now trying to build together as a team, looking at what we can draw into the action plan to have some focus a little bit more on Wokingham Town Centre. But we are not going to forget anywhere else in the borough, because we need to be able to maintain what we've achieved, having regard to the changes implemented or put in place by the Environment Act 2021, which slightly changed the essence of what we have to do now across the borough.
And Steve.
And I think just to pick up on the point made as well, you know, the council in its sort of wider spectrum will have a part to play in this, and its enabling role as well. So through active travel, through LC WIP, through the public health agenda, through the sort of the schools and the sort of the, you know, the health and fitness and the daily walks and all of that. All of those things will start to sort of have a cumulative effect, and also they're linked through the LTP and also anything to do with the sort of the local plan and planning policy. So playing all of those elements in means that there's a wider spectrum of activity that over time will bring those benefits and contributing factors towards this as well. So it's embedding those and giving those time to sort of have an impact and an outcome that's a contributing factor as well.
So that from what you've said, then there's nothing specific that's going to be done for the Wokingham town area. Instead, it is just a reliance on the general borough-wide schemes, some of which will hopefully have an impact on Wokingham town. I know Wokingham town very, very well. So if there's nothing specific you're going to do, that's fine. If there isn't actually a plan for Wokingham, that's fine as well. And that's what it sounds like at the moment.
I think within that, there's flushing that plan out of the wider plans and strategies that are in place. So the LTP, the local transport plan, which we're required to have as a local authority, will have a direct impact on the town centre, because those policies will come to pass, those levels of investment, that sort of direction. The bus service improvement plan will bring all of that to pass as well, as in sort of car parking, town centre management, economic regeneration will bring those elements in. So we can flush more of those, but those elements are there as we speak.
Changing the location completely from Wokingham. When you're looking at sites to do the monitoring, do you ever look at sites where there is industrial activity which is very close to residential areas? And I'm thinking of an area of Woodley called Lily May Court, which backs onto West Road, which is off Viscount Way, which is part of the sort of industrial area of Woodley. And in that area, the residents are absolutely convinced that the air from the industrial estate is harming the children, to the extent that people got asthma, health is suffering, people are getting divorced because the air quality and the standard of living is being so reduced by residents' perception of poor air quality. Can you choose to put a monitoring there?
Monitoring in that location wouldn't be required under the LAQM framework because of the level of traffic in that vicinity, and the pollutant of concern is nitrogen dioxide.
Yep.
I've not included any information specifically relating to the area around sort of Viscount Way, what have you.
Yep.
We happen to have done monitoring in that location.
Yep.
And I can find the results and provide them separately. So we have looked there. We've previously looked at sort of the roads in that vicinity, and road-wise, it's not an area that it would be a pollution concern. Yeah. The traffic movements are actually incredibly light. I think there were some specific issues potentially raised regarding dust and particulates, and some particulate monitoring was undertaken there and wasn't found to be unusual.
Sorry, I'm stunned to hear it wasn't found to be unusual, given what the impact it's having on people. I appreciate that in terms of this report, the pollution you're monitoring for wasn't being monitored there. But you can only do it basically where there is a high volume of traffic.
For the pollutant of concern currently, which is the nitrogen dioxide, then yes, that has been over many years. Lots of sites have been looked at, and it's been done for many years to then identify where we need to have additional sites and to identify what the problem areas were. Within the report, probably referring to page 109. Sorry, possibly 108, sorry, 108 and 109. So within that, there's some other monitoring that's undertaken, and some of the particulate monitoring has started to be undertaken as part of additional project work. So that is another area of concern and an emerging issue that is now gaining momentum in terms of there being no safe level for the PM 2.5. We don't monitor that currently with our monitors, and I think on a national level, even the locations where the national scheme for monitoring the AURN network, they're now choosing locations in residential settings to be starting to get a bit more on the PM 2.5 side of things. So we've done some monitoring with the PM 2.5, and you'll find on some of the work that's been done under the DEFRA grants has been in relation to the PM 2.5, and is all drawing towards the new targets that have been set under the Environment Act, which is a new national target. It's not strictly in the LAQM framework at the moment, but it certainly is the direction of travel. And how we subsequently go forward with those sort of activities is yet to be determined, but there is a start of contribution being made by some of this work. Again, you know, the particulate matter, the study that was done around Winnersh and other areas, that found that the PM 2.5, although it's an indicative level that was done with indicative monitors, it found that that was below 10 micrograms per metre cubed, which is the target for 2040. So there's an indication. I'm not saying that it everywhere's great, but the indication is that there are sort of some levels of the PM 2.5 where we're getting an indication that things are okay.
Yeah.
Whether the monitoring is being done at the locations that are most likely to be problematic, now that this is moving into the residential area more than just roads, that's the interesting direction of travel for that particular parameter at the moment.
Thank you, that's very interesting. And then so a final one on this, sorry. So how have we done the indicative monitoring of PM 2.5 at Lily May Court or in that area? Because that is a residential area.
So we did very similar monitoring. I don't know if it was the same equipment as here, but it was very similar, and there were two phases of it were undertaken. But I'd have to do a summary report of those two separate lots, and it isn't within this report at the current time. And off the top of my head, I don't remember the exact findings of the reports, because again, they're quite detailed and technical.
Thank you very much.
Okay, Andrew.
Yes, thanks. I was going to ask a number of questions about particulate matter monitoring, but I think they've been answered both in the report now and also orally. They will be, particulate matter will be included in the air quality action plan, the updated one, or?
I think that we will include some measures that are going towards sort of that contribution, but those are. So we won't be in a position where we need an air quality strategy in a statutory sense. Where you still have a retained air quality management area, you need an air quality action plan to fulfil the criteria of meeting the objective. But alongside that, you need to consider other measures that may generally assist with maintaining or leading to meeting all objectives as applicable.
Okay, thanks. I think, Emma, you said that the borough retains responsibility to monitor air quality throughout the borough. Did I hear that correctly? Is there an ongoing sort of responsibility to look at the whole of the borough?
The Environment Act 2021 slightly changed the requirements. And so whereas we used to be in pursuit of achieving objectives, where there is a lot more achievement of those objectives, it's now that we must maintain and secure that those objectives are met. My interpretation of that is that that has to be for the whole borough. The fact that some areas of the borough have complied and met objectives for a very long time, and there's very little likelihood of them not meeting objectives, it applies everywhere. We've monitored, though, areas that we've considered to be at risk or at locations that provide us with ongoing long-term background indicators of what's going on in an area. So you'll notice if you look at some of the maps, which you'll find on page 125 onwards of the report, you'll notice that there's Sonning and there's Henley Bridge, but those are quite important from when we initially started doing monitoring many years ago. They were very important as a major crossing. How are people getting across the Thames? So they were quite important. Now they're compliant, and the levels have been for many years relatively low there. But in order to understand what's going on in that area, they're good indicator locations to keep going. Some locations have been dropped over time. Other locations have been picked up as areas change slightly.
What stimulated that question was that, of course, this is a very dynamic sort of situation, I imagine, and there are likely to be some localities where nitrogen dioxide levels might be rising because of increased traffic movements and so forth. So, for example, are there any areas that perhaps might not be considered at air quality risk, or have been considered at risk of low air quality in the past, but could become problematic going forward? And if so, how would that be picked up?
I think we do keep under review. And as I said before, there have been series of review, assessment, detailed assessment, and then it's now in the system within England of an annual status report. Within that, there are elements of continuing to look at screening certain areas. So there are some of the locations that, whilst they provide, for example, a useful indicator for, say, the M4, they're also useful as a potential for what might be going to a future development, what might be going on there. Some of the locations are also relevant to, I'm thinking of the roundabout in Shinfield at the moment, where there was a lot of works going on. But in that area, there's some old monitoring. Yeah, the road network there has changed quite a lot. Yes, exactly. That's exactly the location. Thank you. So the existing premises, the existing sort of location there is actually still serving well, because although the road network has changed, we can still see, well, are they being more effective, less effective? Over time, we might choose to keep that one. But if there's other residential developments, occasionally we'll move and add one to a different location. But alongside this, in terms of review of planning applications, we do review planning applications. We get consulted on those, and we look at air quality impacts of those. So we're looking at lots of things going on that don't necessarily all come into this report. Lots of work does go on into, is that development either going to have a put receptors close to an existing problem area, or is it going to create additional poor air quality?
Norman?
It was just, it kind of follows on from that, actually. You've got the continuous monitor at the Twyford crossroads. Are we going to keep that running? I presume we are just going to keep it running.
So with respect to the automatic monitor at Twyford, that one isn't going to continue to be operated. So as I was saying, the other type of monitoring that's been going on in Twyford will still continue. So there's diffusion tubes, which some of you will know what they look like, but they're just a sort of a small tube that's on lots of lampposts. So that type of monitoring will continue exactly the same locations as it was taking place at. That will continue throughout the year, and it's intended at the current time for that to continue for 3 years. So we'll have another 3 years of data. If any of that data indicates something's going in the wrong direction, even though we've had sufficient confidence in the data that's been collected to date that is appropriate to revoke the AQMA, if the diffusion tubes start to show us differently, then we obviously will reconsider what we might need in that location.
So the continuous monitor is going to be sort of moved somewhere else, or are they movable, or are they just going to be decommissioned?
That one will be decommissioned.
Okay. So how many continuous monitoring sites do we have now?
One.
Which is where? Grove Street.
It's up in the town centre, in Woking town centre.
Chris?
Chair, just from a little bit of a personal angle, if I look at page 124 for the map, the general map of the area, and then reflect on 126 for Shinfield, and I would say these maps are not marginally out of date, but quite old, in that the developments in and around Church Lane, 3 Mile Cross, just south of Junction 11, if you see that on page 124, there is quite a swathe of building work that's gone on there. It's quite an intense area now. The traffic that comes down now through there, because of other building elsewhere, down through Church Lane into Basingstoke Road onto the A33, is quite difficult at times, for want of a better word. And at peak traffic, there is an awful lot of traffic sitting there idling. So there is no monitoring, to my knowledge, going on there now. Now, to give you the anecdotal evidence to go with that, we have to clean our house regularly to get rid of the black dust from the particulates, the windows in the house, etc. Most of my neighbours have got the same sort of problem. It is an issue, and it is an issue for my own health, because I'm now on an inhaler because of it, because I've got chest issues with breathing. I've never had those issues before. I'm not saying there's the evidence, the traffic sitting outside my door spewing out rubbish all the time, but there are so many areas in the borough that have been developed quite intensively over the last few years, and they're not monitored. They've never been on the monitoring grid because they've been rural. They're not anymore. So is there any way that temporary, instantaneous monitoring can be done with any mobile equipment that could take a snapshot? Is this an area of concern?
Monitoring equipment exists that can be used for short-term studies. It's not something that we'd be considering under the LAQM regime at the moment, and it's not something that we currently have budget for.
Okay, thank you. I don't have another question for this, because if there isn't a budget, then we're just going to see what the responses are from the doctors from the health reports. Thank you.
So sorry, is there any way that, how would Chris get his site promoted so that it might get monitored in the future if the budget occurred? Is there a mechanism for?
There isn't currently a mechanism. I mean, I can take the information of the exact location, which I didn't take then.
A33 Junction, Basingstoke.
A33
Junction, Basingstoke Road, south of Junction 11.
Junction.
So it's just outside the M4 and 28, so it's below it. But the developers, speaking, and the development of that area is such that the traffic is quite increased, heavily increased over the last few years. And there's a lot of idling traffic sitting down there. So it's not so much, I would turn around and say, I can't turn around and say that the nitrous oxide is an issue, because I don't know, but I can turn around and say that particulates is, because of the amount of muck that we have to clear up.
Okay, Adrian?
Yeah, thanks very much for this report. I think it's a really important job that's done. I think everybody who's got children in our borough has got a stake in this. And it's a little bit disappointing to see that we're going down from 3 areas to 1 area. I know you've explained the legal reasons why and everything else, but it's still a little bit disappointing. And I would certainly agree with Councillor Johnson that we ought to, where possible, request at least temporary collection of data. But one of the things that, I'm looking at the reports, and there's lots of graphs, which is helpful for me. And I see, obviously, in 2020 lockdown time, there was a significant drop. We've gone up again, but not to the previous peaks. What are your thoughts as to the reasons for that? Is it because of, the impact of electric cars or vehicles, or is it something else? What are your thoughts?
I think it's a combination of factors. People aren't working in the same way as previously. People aren't using their vehicles in the same way. I think as we all know, the pandemic meant that not only individuals, but businesses had to suddenly, if they weren't already moving in a direction of travel of remote working, they had to do that very, very quickly. So the use of, and within Wokingham, the use of sort of Teams meetings and other ways of actually conducting business came into play. Things like that have continued since, and they have become a kind of a normality. And whilst in-person meetings occur, a lot of people aren't necessarily moving in the way they did before. But people have started moving again, so levels have gone up. Alongside that, the national initiatives and people locally, as you drive around, are buying electric vehicles and are using them in the local area, so that will contribute. Existing types of vehicles, the combustion engine vehicles, have also had improvements in their emission standards, year after year. And lots of people in this local area do have relatively new vehicles, be it electric or otherwise. And I think in the local transport plan, in the draft that's currently out to consultation, that also has raised that traffic levels are going almost back up to previous levels, but it's different types of transport. So there's actually the transit van and delivery culture that has developed during the pandemic. That seems to be a lot more prevalent. A lot more people are purchasing that way. So the type of transport, times of day it's travelling has changed. And I think a lot of those things are here now to stay. And I think people will continue to buy different types of vehicles. And of course, I think there's still the intention that certain types of vehicles aren't going to be available in a number of years to come, or which will go further. And I also think people are choosing to walk around, walk to the station, walk to different locations, and to use bicycles. Not everybody, but it's going in that direction.
Thank you for that answer. I do walk around a little bit, and I always walk into town, but I've walked around Winnersh, for example, knocking on doors and delivering leaflets and things. So I did notice the green box, which is the monitoring box. It's got a sign on it saying air quality, something or other. It looks like a sort of little substation or something right next to the M4. So I've walked past it many times, so obviously I'm aware of it. But I think a lot of our residents aren't aware of whether their air is being monitored. And in this instance, following this report, that the area of Twyford and Winnersh M4, those areas are going to be stopped from monitoring. I think that would be important information for some of the residents that they probably wouldn't see much in the media. I just wanted to try and understand, how do you reach out to the residents, to get them informed of this important work, frankly.
We don't use any particular tools to share this information. We will be putting more information onto the website now that we have a website that we can start developing a bit further. And I'm liaising with my colleagues in public health, because the health section, I think myself and my colleagues in public health in agreement, would be a good section for it to be. But I also think we have to have the balance of who our customers are. So we have our resident customers who need something there potentially in a health section. Business customers, we need something there in a business section about where they can get information on air quality that might be necessary for them to proceed with a development or to do an activity to enhance, so that they also have it. But I think we've got different audiences, and to try and sort of get the right information for different audiences, I think is going to be a task. With respect to the revocation, we will be notifying residents by letter. Residents who are for the address points within the revocations will be informed of that, so they will know specifically. We aren't planning at the moment to do any particular wider distribution to people outside of the AQMA.
Thank you very much for your answers.
Okay, Andy.
Thank you. So mine, I think there's a couple of questions and they might be related. And I'm going to disagree with you, Adrian, about removing the two monitoring locations. Because I think, and I'm addressing this to Ian as well, because I know Ian's online, this is actually a really good news story, isn't it? That the level of air, of this type of air pollution is, I don't want to say safe, but it's below the level that's worrying. It's actually really good news. So you've got 2 out of 3 are going. We've got 1 which is almost there, and it might go. And if I was the executive member, I would be doing a press release on this, but then I'm not, because I think it's a really good news story, to be honest, because everybody wants reassurance that air quality is within the right limits. And I'm sure you'll get individual circumstances, and I think that Chris has raised, where there are other things which need following up, but that's what the team is for, I guess. But in terms of areas where there have been concerns, now there aren't concerns, that's good, isn't it? Am I missing something?
Absolutely.
And then the other thing is we've had this figure, the 40. I'm very bad at science. Is the 40 milligrams or whatever that might think the 40 micrograms. Could you give us some context? Because at the moment we know that's the threshold. If we were to go to central London, for example, what would the levels be there? Because people always hold up central London as an area where it's terrible, and we've got one place where there's a little bit of concern, but I don't know how different these two areas are. Could you give us some context, please?
Okay.
Thank you.
I would have to have a look at some of the London data to be able to provide you with information on that. I can give you some slightly more local information. So there's been improvements in lots of local authority areas. It's widespread. It's across the country. It's within London. London has had some of the stronger measures, and indeed it has a completely different technical guidance because of the particular issues that had been present in London. So levels are going down and have been. Within Reading, they've got widespread compliance, and I don't know if you are familiar with Reading's air quality management area. Okay, so where I would refer to ours as being like squashed, elongated, daddy long legs, they really do. In Reading, it's more of a spider with quite furry legs. They're sort of quite thick. I'm just trying to do a comparison, and without having a map with me. So theirs is more, big body in the centre and lots of arms going out on most of the arterial, most of the routes going in. But their most recent monitoring, they're now at a situation where I think their potential exceedance on a diffusion tube was in towards the one of the river crossings, and there were another couple that are still above sort of the marginal level of concern, but they're achieving. So, that's a near neighbour, but anyone who's been or driven into Reading knows how wide the roads are, how congested it is or appears to be, but congestion doesn't necessarily equate to pollution, I think is a point moving forward. In terms of our immediate neighbours as well, then in West Berkshire, they are revoking their AQMAs. They had a couple. In Bracknell, they're revoking an AQMA, but they are retaining an AQMA. And they still have an issue on Crowthorne High Street. So some of the retained areas, when we know that other areas are achieving, are of interest. So whilst there's good news, there's also, it's still not good enough, I think is how I describe it.
So I'm bringing Ian online. He's had his hand up for.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. If I can reply to both Adrian and Andy, I think Adrian may have misconstrued slightly. The revocation is a revocation of the designation. It doesn't change the monitoring, the ongoing monitoring, not the continuous monitoring, that ceases, but the diffusion tubes will remain and monitoring will continue. We're not stopping monitoring, Adrian, at all. Secondly, Andy, yes, I think it generally is a good news story, and we take that on board. But if anything, we were slightly reluctant about Twyford. We'd actually hoped to get another couple of years of data before we revoked Twyford, but DEFRA made it clear that in the next annual report, which they will be getting in June, they expect to see 2 revocations. So we're not getting much choice on that. But yes, generally it's a good news story, and it's for the reasons which Emma outlined: the change in people's patterns of travel, the change in the vehicle usage. And we have been focusing effectively on nitrogen dioxide, which largely comes from the combustion engines of our traditional forms of vehicle. We have not really measured particulates, and I think if Chris's comment about dust, that is not nitrogen dioxide, that is particulate matter. And I think people are beginning to wake up to the importance of particulates following the coroner verdict, I think was it in 2022, that the young girl who lived next to the North Circular Road or the South Circular Road, I forget the details now, but the coroner actually cited the pollution from the road, particularly particulate matter, in the cause of death. And so I think the government will start to wake up to this, and we will then potentially be able to look more actively at particulate matter.
Thank you. And Steve.
Thank you, Chair. Just to sort of clarify the point, a direct quote from the 3rd paragraph of the summary: air quality has improved in Wokingham Borough Council to such an extent that it is considered appropriate, having regard to the technical guidance for the draft recommendations, that 2 out of the 3 AQMAs are revoked. Within that is a positive. Absolutely.
Okay, and Chris.
Sorry, I'm not harping on about anything else. And just generally, I would say the report is really positive and there are lots of improvements. Vehicle types, yes, they're changed. So they're not just the pollutants from combustion engines is going to go down, but we're still always going to get brake dust and tyre particles. That is an issue that has always been there and always will still be there, no matter how many vehicles are on the road. There will always still be diesel engine trucks floating around for a long time. So that these things are still there. There's room for improvement in time, but it is a long journey. I can see that. And at the moment, there has been a great improvement. And Andy took some of it away from me because I was going to ask the question for West Berkshire, Maidenhead and Windsor, Reading, the M4 corridor AQMAs, have they also been in a position to be able to show the improvements on that corridor, on the M4 corridor?
Sorry, which particular local authorities did you?
So we're looking at our neighbouring authorities that have the M4 corridor going through their patch as well. So we're talking about West Berkshire, Maidenhead and Windsor, Reading, Slough, those sort of areas. I know it's not information you'll have now. Just a puzzle, just query: are they showing an improvement as well for that particular motorway?
I would like to check data for Windsor and Maidenhead rather than misinform you. To my knowledge, West Berkshire had never declared the M4 as an AQMA. Due to relevant exposures. There's a particular reason why you would do it, and it's about having the relevant exposure. So if you haven't got potential receptors, you wouldn't be looking at.
No, I was just looking at the map and showing that, seeing that I can see where our M4 MQA stops and Reading's responsibility takes over, and then we pick up a little bit, and then.
Yeah,
so,
I don't think Reading added that bit there, and then the next bit along is still us.
Yeah.
And
or are we responsible for all of that section, including the bit that actually runs through Reading Borough?
The bit through Reading Borough, they would declare that if it had relevant, well, one, if the monitoring indicated to them within their borough that was the necessary thing to do. I'm afraid I will go back to my spider. And where it doesn't necessarily join bits of daddy longlegs. So as you come out from Reading on our boundary there, you will find points where we then don't have an AQMA and never have had necessarily immediately next to them. And at some locations, it is because there is a change in the type of housing, proximity to road, and then the relevant exposure within our area. And some areas we had monitored, and we stopped doing that. Within limits, it's also up to a local authority to determine what they're going to declare and how they're going to declare it, and what for. So Reading made its choices based on obviously the evidence, but having regard to their particular infrastructure and the concentration of housing. Within Wokingham, we've looked at different areas and have slightly different AQMAs. Really, they are very, very narrow comparatively. Windsor and Maidenhead, I'd have to look up and see what the situation is there.
Thank you for that.
Okay, Steve, you want to say something?
And I think also just to pick up on a general point as well, all of this sort of work in activity and science, to a degree, is still being affected by the variables of a change in society. So you go back to the original presentation, this evening from Louise, hybrid working, parental carer support, flexible working, working from home. All of those elements start to feed into this. If I catch the train to come to Wokingham, it's cheaper on a Monday and a Friday, and it's dearer Tuesday to Thursday. Why would that be? Why would that be? So all of that is feeding in. Those variables are feeding in, and we're still sort of settling down from that post-COVID, Teams, hybrid, Zoom calls, and settling those things in. So all of that will catch up, and that data will come through. But it has sort of changed some of the dynamics, for established processes that nationally we need to sort of pick up on these. So that's just a thought to keep in mind for the future.
Yeah, Andrew.
Yeah, I'd like just to ask some questions about recommendations 4 and 5 on page 29. Now, in the report, it's explained that having an up-to-date AQAM action plan or AQAP action plan, is really important when applying for government grants. And I think that the next round of grants is due in September. So my first question is, under recommendation 5, where it says a schedule, an air quality update will come to the Overview and Scrutiny Management Committee summer, early autumn 24. Is that simply an update, or is it the air quality action plan, the updated air quality action plan? And then I'll explain that. In fact, I'll explain the relevance of that question now, because it seems to me that if the next round of grants is in September, it seems to me that if it was at all possible for the updated action plan to be completed for the 17th of July Overview and Scrutiny Committee, that may enable or help, to achieve, it may help to facilitate sort of grant applications and not miss a year, as it were. Sorry for not being more articulate. So the question is, what was intended to come to the Overview and Scrutiny Management Committee, late September or autumn? If it's the action plan, is any possibility, that it might be able to come for the 17th of July?
My apologies. It's certainly something we can look at. If I direct you to page 39, this is where I sort of touched on potential governance and overview and scrutiny. And with reference to the recommendation about coming back to overview and scrutiny, that was suggested as at least once a year, and it would be useful to be doing something after we've had an ASR and we have the feedback from DEFRA. Now, on page 39, I've identified potentially quite a bit of activity of interest, just with estimated dates. So this was for your consideration, and I understand you're also considering your work plans. That's part of this meeting as well, to look at that. So this was for consideration. This timescale is possible. Whether or not a final version would be ready at that point, but certainly a draft version, whether that would, so whether that would be July would then be too late for the draft, and we actually want to be circulating that sooner. So this is a bit I didn't have a definitive on. I've given some suggestions. I didn't have that date for ONS. I didn't find that the other day when I looked about the forward plan. I was looking. So it was about what might be able to happen given everything else that as a council we have in the next few months, and what may then be on subsequent meeting plans. So it's what wants to be seen from this lot and when, and trying not to hold things up. But also I appreciate you have very busy committee schedules, so it may not have been an important area of work.
I think just to pick up on what Emma said, we can certainly go away and sort of look and finesse that timetable to see what is possible and how that could feed into your future work plans. I think very much it should come back to this committee. So we'll do a bit of work, and we can pick that up with Neil and make sure that we can come up with a timetable that works, because I do take the point that's raised. So we'll look at that and confirm.
Yeah.
I do have two recommendations that I think might have come out of the discussion tonight. If there are no more questions, shall I?
Any more questions?
Okay, well, we do have the, if we turn to page 29, okay, we have the 5 recommendations that are already there, and I don't, even in light of just the, you know, the recent discussion, the most recent discussion, I don't think there's any need to change 4 or 5. Okay, so I think we keep those, but 2 further possible recommendations. Firstly, recommendation that the council develops a strategy for communicating and messaging with the different stakeholders about the changes that would take place in the area of AQM. This is going back to some of the points that Andy and others raised, you know, about in some ways this is a good news story. It's a complicated story. It is a story that is of considerable interest and importance to quite diverse stakeholders, including business, residents, and so forth. So development of a strategy for communication and the messaging. Okay, have I captured that, the essence of that? Okay, and then the second one is going back to the matter that Chris, amongst others, raised. And this is relating to, I'll give the exact wording in just a moment, but it's about mechanisms for collecting, to enable the collection of air quality data, including on particulate matter, and locations of concern where data is not currently being collated or collected. And I think, you know, the example that Chris gave, I think it's 3 Mile Cross. Is that a fair summary? Yeah, as an exemplar. So to develop a mechanism, you know, by which new localities, you know, can be identified and where data on air quality, including particulate matter, can be collected. Again, have I captured the essence of that in that recommendation? Okay, were there any other recommendations that people feel might have come out of this discussion? Yeah.
I do think there should be some sort of perhaps engage with CEM about putting out something to the public as a general good news story, because I think it is a good news story, and I appreciate the borough can't necessarily take the credit for it, but it does show that long-term things are happening which are good news.
Sorry, Chair, there's an error in the recommendations. We have to thank, the first recommendation has to be to thank all the officers, you know, been involved in preparing these documents and for their presentations tonight. So it's actually 8 recommendations. Sorry.
Okay, yeah, fine. Okay, so anyway, thank you very much to Steve, Ian, Emma and Lorinda. Right. $75.
Say a few words on.
Oh, it's decent, yeah, thanks.
Right, thank you, Chair. The agenda item 75, this is the annual process for developing the overview and scrutiny work programmes for the year ahead. So in line with the usual process, I've already contacted town and parish councils. We're putting out social media. I've emailed all members, and it's about just getting suggestions to come in over the next month. We will then bring a more detailed report to the March committee, setting out a draft for each of the scrutiny committees for members then to decide and determine priorities at that meeting. So that's the gist of it, but happy to answer any questions.
Has anyone got some questions? No? Oh, Andrew.
It's not a question, it's an observation. On page 150 of the bottom, the last bullet point talks about a mid-year review of the work progress by Overview and Scrutiny Management Committee. Can we clarify, have we actually been doing that each year?
This will be a first, I think.
Okay, that's really good to note. Okay, yeah.
Okay. So we wait until. Oh, sorry, Chris.
So there was just one question about the work schedule. Is there a list of things that have to happen, compulsory things that are presented at certain meetings, in addition to what we can choose? I mean,
so under the Constitution, there are certain items which go to the different scrutiny committees, so they will be factored in as a starting point, and then other ones will be added in at the committee's discretion.
Can I just add on that point? Certainly, with Children's Services Overview and Scrutiny, and I suspect possibly HOSC as well, there are certain annual reports from different stakeholders that have to go before the scrutiny for scrutiny every year. And it's a really important point, Chris, because we need to keep on top of that. It's very easy, if we're not alert, for to get behind or for some to slip, slip through the net. So it's really, really important. So.
Okay, so we'll wait till. Oh, sorry. Yeah, we've got the C. Sorry, it was. Right, we've got the three recommendations on page 149. So, would we have a show of hands on those? Great. Let's. They're agreed. Okay, so moving on to item 76, the Executive Forward Programme. If anyone's got any comments they want to make on page 155, 156.
Just very quickly, and this perhaps relates back to what we were talking about earlier, and in the meeting we had prior to this, is we've got examples here of finance reports that are going to the executive, but they're not being scrutinised either by a finance scrutiny committee or as part of the work programme of any other committees. So there's three items: 1362, 1363, and 1364. That's all. So, comment.
Can I just,
Andrew?
It might be worth saying something to the whole committee about a discussion that the chairs of all of the Overview and Scrutiny committees had just prior, to coming to this meeting. Do you want to say something about that, or someone else because is that okay?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's one of the things which came up was how there's, although we have the budget scrutiny, we scrutinise bits of the budget, that there is no scrutiny of any of the financial reports that go to the executive. And it is, as someone said to me, most large organisations would have a finance scrutiny committee, certainly public sector, and we don't have one. And it is a separate function from audit. It is not audit, and it might be something that either a separate committee or the workloads of the different committees take into account in the following year. And it's also worth dropping in at this point that on the Constitutional Review Working Group, they're also looking at scrutiny committees and which scrutiny committees we should have. So I've got a feeling there's two separate parallel streams of thought going on here.
Pauline.
That made me think, Andy, about something different, actually. Are we bringing the results of the final recommendations of the Constitutional Review Working Group on the new constitution back to scrutiny?
Well, I don't know about coming back to scrutiny. I know that there's like an interim report, I think I'm right in saying, Neil, which is going to come to council soon, but it's certainly, it won't be finalised until after the elections because there's just so much. But there will be a chance to look at bits that have been done, but I don't think they're coming to scrutiny. I don't think.
I think it might be a good idea if it did come to scrutiny, actually. We've seen some interesting, in inverted commas, recommendations from the standing orders or the Constitution Working Group over the years, which have been ripped apart at full council. And I think getting it into scrutiny to get a cross section of people to look at it before it goes to full council might not be a bad idea.
I completely agree with you, Pauline.
That sounds like a good idea. Yeah. Andrew.
Yeah, so just to clarify, okay, I think, Neil, are we minuting that amongst items to go into our forward programme will be an item on scrutiny of the council's financial reports? Is that the correct? And secondly, scrutiny of any of the review of the Constitutional Review Committee. Yeah.
And I think the plan is, I think I'm right, Neil, for it to go to March Council. So if we're going to get it into scrutiny before March Council, people are going to have to get the move on.
Yeah. Yep.
What we could do, I mean, I think the only reason we have to meet in person is because if there is a vote, and if we didn't think there was going to be a vote on anything, we could theoretically, I guess, have a meeting offline. Is that right now? Online, sorry, my mistake. It's late.
I think that begs the question, but what if someone online wanted to vote? Then do we all rush in to shoot end, or how does it work? So we'll give it some thought. And I think previously we'd asked for the ONS section to come here, but if you're asking for the whole thing to come here, I'm happy to spread that good news.
I just simply think it might be sensible, given some of the things we've seen in the past. You know, I've been on Constitution Review Working Group several times, and it is quite difficult to think of all of a few more minds on it. Quite often helps.
Oh, sorry, Chris.
So to really asking a question, because I've missed something there. This is for the Andy's. Sorry, Andy, my short-term memory's gone as well. Constitutional Review. Are you trying to bring this to some sort of overview before March? Because I thought, I understood that there wouldn't be anything really ready till after the election. So it's something that's going to drift into next year before we've got anything meaty to look at.
The only thing that will be ready for March is the bits that have been done so far. So we're working through it chapter by chapter, and we're not. I think, again, I would hate to hazard a guess, but we'll put about half done because there's just so much. We're literally going through it line by line, or rather, the officers are, and then we're.
So on the back of the election after that.
Yeah, so I think it's anticipated the final version will be ready sometime in the summer, but in the meantime, There is a slight concern is that some people will be expecting a full document and it's not going to be the full.
So my view there would be along the lines of, if it's only half finished, there's no definition that says it's definitely going to be that you're not going to affect something that's already you think is finished with the rest of it that's coming along. There may be changes that get derived from the rest of the work that's being done. So is it a likelihood of having something presented that actually has to change later on?
Well, I think that scrutiny is the best place for that change to happen. That's the point of scrutiny, isn't it? Yeah.
So Pauline.
Yeah, I was just about to make the same point Andy has. I think scrutiny is the best point to look at it. And actually, having read the Constitution, it's not something you want to do in one meeting in one go. It's even worse than the local transport plan. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I think doing part of it wouldn't be a bad idea.
Yeah. And I mean, you're working through clause by clause, aren't you, or section by section? So you're not doing the whole thing at once.
Yeah, we're going through it chapter by chapter. So we're going through it line by line. We have the opportunity to comment on any line, but some bits, like the rules of debate, for example, they're the rules of debate. I mean, there might be a little bit of tidying up, but they're going to be the same. You still have point of orders, you still have the same basis for interventions. So that really interesting stuff hasn't changed, I'm afraid.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, what happened in full council wasn't it that the recommendations didn't all pass, did they? So I think going to scrutiny would be a good idea. So Andrew, sorry.
Yeah, I totally sympathise with what Andy and Pauline have said, on this matter. I'm also uncomfortable with a sort of a drip feed approach, to bringing amendments, to the Constitution, to the council. I suspect that is not best practice. Let's put it that way. And I think it would be almost very, very difficult, indeed, to bring whatever the next sort of iterations are, to a meeting for the 6th of March. I think that'd be very difficult, and it's also already a very, very packed meeting. I think that we could make a recommendation to, I don't know who, the executive or the Constitution Review Committee, that we stop this drip feed approach or pause it, okay, until there's a substantial body of material to consider.
I think drip feed is probably a little bit unfair because the chapters are quite chunky, so there is a chunk of work that has been done, and I think it might actually be easier to look at it in two parts. I guess, and council will want to see something before the elections because otherwise it just looks like nothing has happened. So I do think it's a good idea to put something in front of council. I guess the final constitution will be voted on by full council, but it will be when it's all ready in one go. That's my sense. I'm not the chair of the group or anything, but I do think looking at it, especially for me, it would be ridiculous for me to say that something should go to council before it has been to scrutiny. I mean, it's got, and it might mean a special one-off meeting. But having said that, you know what the Constitution's like. I mean, it might take that.
Yeah, I don't think it. I don't think it does any harm to take a few chapters and have a look at them and just see what the mood is like in it. They are relatively standalone. Yeah. They're not necessarily completely interrelated.
The plan is to present the finished chapters to council for March. So yeah, so the exact detail of when the officers will have finished producing the version for March, I don't know.
But it sounds a good idea if it's coming to council in March that we look at it before.
Correct.
Council.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Okay. Andrew.
Can I propose that Al, as chair of the committee, talks with who are the appropriate people? I suppose Stephen as the leader of the council and Susan,
so
as the CEO.
The chair of the committee is Imogen, and Stephen is on the committee, Prue's on the committee, Andrew Moulton's on the committee, I'm on the committee, Keith Baker's on the committee. I think that's it. So I would have thought Imogen and Andrew. Andrew's probably the senior officer.
Okay. So that would be my proposal, that Al talks with them, about our concerns, and the reasoning behind, those concerns. And it does emphasising, that this really does, it's an important example, of the executive's desire, for us to be actively involved in overview. Yeah.
I think it needs to be seen as an offer of help rather than a criticism.
Can we move on? Yeah, okay. Right, yeah. So, okay, so any more? Oh, okay, Chris, sorry.
So it's just one item on that then is to say that it's unlikely that we're going to be able to get this into an existing meeting. So what is the last dates we can have meetings before we get into Purdue?
I think Purda's around the middle of March. So we've got a meeting on the 6th, but let's have the conversation with Al and those members first, and then we could sort it out outside the meeting.
Yeah. Heard is on the 22nd and the last council meeting is on the 21st. So that's basically, so that's the date. Right. So any more comments on the forward programme? No. Okay. So moving on to the 77 draft work programme. 6th of February, that's today. So March, I think nothing's changed there, has it? I think then children's services. Going forward and climate emergency. Health. No comments. So no comments on that. So the action tracker. Any comments on the action tracker? Anything? Andrew.
Yeah, just on page 179, Q2 corporate performance report. Further information requested to be circulated to members. There's about, I think from memory, it's 2 or 3 very specific items. They mostly had to do with crime and related matters. I don't recall seeing information or receiving information on that. So if that could be followed up, please. So.
Okay. So if that's that, I think the meeting has come to an end. Thank you all very much.